5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
What do you think, Marge? All I need is a title.
So, some quick notes before getting into these questions. First, this is an old video, and some of the references it makes are to old issues, which means I will still respond to the old issue, but I might also add some insights into some new, more recent events, just to make things more relevant to 2019. Also, where possible, I will cite relevant information from my own video library because the people asking these questions ask about my own videos, my own video activity, and the actions of my own fans or community, such as it is. As I am a new and small channel, I might speculate about some of this as I don't have a large community yet. Also, many of the responders to this video have been really hard on a couple people. One, who I will refer to as Denmark Boy, repeats a question about Anti-SJWs' obsession with skulls. And the responders were also really hard on Steve Shives, many of them refusing to answer his questions, because he has had the habit of blocking people on Twitter. Steve has not blocked me, and so therefore I believe his questions deserve a fair chance at a response. Please note that I reserve the right to simply reply that I don't know about something that fits that description. I'm not going to make myself look like a faux expert by commenting on things that I know nothing about. Also, I reserve the right to get as snarky, rude, or dismissive as I wish while answering these questions. I will return incivility with incivility. With that being said, let's get into these.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
How I respond to things largely depends on what I am responding to, and what series I am working on at the time. Most of the projects I work on, I attempt to maintain an even response with little rudeness or snark. Square of the Village Idiot is specifically different in that the SVI series is meant to take on stupid people, stupid events, or stupid ideas, and bring to them the ire and snark that they deserve. Because of this, I don't see myself as responding in the same way to things that I dislike. I'm saying the entire damn thing is stupid, and then explaining why. As to anything being politically correct, I don't care, so long as my response is either entertaining, educational, or both.
What is it with you people and skulls? No, seriously! What is it with you people and skulls? For the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual, literal felonies? Like, you might want to work on that? I mean, I thought the Ralph retort was so rational when he was fantasizing about beating up women with dyed hair, but then he assaulted a police officer, and finally I was convinced.
Although I don't have a fetish, a fixation, or even a fascination with skulls, I'll admit that some people's skull artwork is cool enough to be used as backgrounds in my videos, when the content calls for this. As for the people you portray in your video question, I've had no contact or experience with those people.
How do you define right-wing? Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labeled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labeled right-wing a bad thing to you? And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labeling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
To answer your first question, I define right-wing as people right of the political center, or the centrist position. I don't care much about labels. This is YouTube and the internet. Life is tough. Wear a helmet. The ability to call people what you want comes with the equal ability of others to do the same. And I think we'll see a number of times in this video where SJWs don't like to be the targets of incoming fire.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter? Or is it just easier to do the bleach thing.
That would be great if SJWs would like to sit down and have an honest conversation about topics and with people that they have a disagreement with. Unfortunately, this rarely happens. You often get this,
Can you shut the fuck up for a second, too? Rape accusations discredit rape victims, which reinforces rape culture, which is part of patriarchy. The idea of certain people are inherently more valuable than other people because of superficial physical attributes is part of patriarchy.
most of the time I use the drink bleach bit in Square the Village Idiot, when I have used both of the other moron bits.
Shut up! Can't you just hide morons! I'm surrounded by morons! Morons! I'm surrounded by morons!
Or if I want to message the audience that what is on the video at that moment is fucking torture, and it makes me want to slowly kill myself. So the idea of drinking bleach is aimed at me, not the target of my videos.
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great. That's entirely laudable. But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
My videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes with a heavy reliance on the entertainment, because if you are entertained, you will come back, you will share the videos, and so on. As such, I don't have to be professional, and I will admit to you that in some instances of Square the Village Idiot, I am more professional than I perhaps could be.
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
Yeah, and what about the terms racist, sexist, homophobe, transphobe, misogynist, patriarchy, and all the other words that the SJW left has worn down so much that they too have lost any meaning? It has gotten to the point that these words are used so often that they pretty much refer to anyone with a mild disagreement with the SJW agenda. Therefore, in the words of Milo, what this does is blur the definitions of these words to the point where you do real damage by not being able to call a really dangerous person any of those words.
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
Soon you will be singing this along with me, kids. My videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes. With that in mind, I go after the feminist arguments that either come at me from the news or the events of the day, or those that I am interested in and of themselves. I don't care whether they are the strongest arguments for feminism. That's not how my channel or most other channels work.
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So, yeah.
This is why I referred to this video as being old, because I am not sure that this person is still around or doing anything related to this question. However, in many of my videos I do address hard issues, such as cyberbullying, self-harm, suicide, child predators, the misuse of gendered labels, misusing children for political or environmental causes, and a number of other subjects. With that in mind, if this person or anybody else wanted to talk with me, I put my contact information at the end of each video and in the description boxes below them.
What is third wave feminism? Because I've often heard you folks insist that you have no objection to feminism in general. It's specifically third wave feminism that you have a quarrel with. So what is third wave feminism specifically? And what specifically about third wave feminism do you have such a problem with?
Well, first let's define some terms. First wave feminism dealt mostly with recognizing the women's right to vote. Second wave feminism dealt mostly with recognizing women's sexual, reproductive, and career-holding rights. Through these first two iterations of the women's rights movement, women are largely equal to men in every way that matters. Third wave feminism does not recognize this fact. They spend a lot of time complaining about non-existent issues, such as the pay gap and pink tax. They needlessly attack men's rights groups as somehow infringing on women's rights. They use most of the same violent and bullying tactics as the other violent SJW groups, and they demand that you agree with them 110% or you are a traitor to all womanhood.
Of patriarchy, of patriarchy, of patriarchy,
Of patriarchy.
Why is it that this feminist...
Calm down, young lady. The correct word.
My free speech!
No, they're not. You have to obey the rules of the venue.
But this is free speech if you're so concerned!
Not free
Yes,
Please keep your comments. Please keep your comments to the Q&A section.
Keep your hate speech out of this campus.
Keep your hate speech out of this campus! Keep your hate speech out of this campus! Keep your hate speech out of this campus!
Utter mad. Represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists.
Whoa, wait! Sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men, but not ladies? Fuck you! Get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit!
Ah, Trigglypuff, the gift that keeps on giving. Neither Trigglypuff nor the McDonald's guy represent anyone but themselves. However, Trigglypuff pretty well demonstrates some of the characteristics of your general SJW. She is loud, abusive, abrasive, ill-mannered, and mean-tempered. These are traits shared by...
Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was a general.
Right beforehand, you fucking said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir.
Can you shut the fuck up for a second, too? Rape accusations discredit rape victims, which reinforces rape culture, which is part of patriarchy. The idea of certain people are inherently more valuable than other people because of superficial physical attributes is part of patriarchy.
Off our streets, Nazis come! 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 Off our streets!
While there may very well be people in the men's rights movement that act out like Trigglypuff, they would not be the norm.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
First off, grow a spine. I don't care who you associate with, and if you don't want to be associated with a person or a group, that is up to you to do something about it, not anyone else. And the same goes for me. If someone were to try to lump me in with a group or person that I want nothing to do with, it would be up to me to say nuh-uh.
If SJWs are bad because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just, how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining. Forever. For a living. That's healthy.
First, SJW is an acronym, so you pronounce it using all of the letters in the acronym. It's not like a specific type of Jew. Moving on, as for talking about real problems, if you look at my video library, you'd see that I do talk about real problems.
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
Once again, my videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes, and feminist theory is seldom either educational nor entertaining. I also have to be interested enough in the subject to put out a video that I can be sure will be a high enough quality product. I am certainly not going to waste time going into theories about why today's oppressive patriarchy is holding women down.
Of patriarchy.
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate? Which books written by second-wave feminists have you read and found interesting? Which second-wave feminist activists have you specifically admired as you formed the opinion that you like second-wave feminism but you have no use for third-wave feminism? I'm just curious.
Sorry, Steve, I don't know that one off the top of my head. It's not that I'm not interested in the subject, I just can't find the authors from the second wave of feminism that would apply.
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say?
I think you don't quite understand how academic journal articles are put together. Even if you do, I will explain for the audience who might not. Most academic articles start off with a paragraph called an abstract, which summarizes the problem to be addressed in the article. The hypothesis proposed to solve that problem, and possibly a brief few words about how everything went. Was the problem solved and how? Following standard grammar, the first paragraph or two should contain the thesis of the article. There will be examples throughout the article of the methods used to get to the solution, and the last 2 or 3 paragraphs will contain a synopsis of the solution and how the authors got to that point. Long story short, you don't necessarily need to read much more than a few sentences or the header of an article to get the gist of the article. And I would speculate that you need to read less of an article to get as much out of it if the article is from a newspaper or a magazine published for the layperson. I would suggest, however, that the question really doesn't apply to my channel or my videos. Most of the time I can find adequate sources to back up my assertions. Where I cannot, I make sure to communicate that to the audience. My sourcing, however, is not meant to meet academic standards, but rather to meet the standards of entertaining viewers. This does not mean that they should get little or poorly sourced information, but rather that going through full academic articles would be boring.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now? Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Does it maybe? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them. They're taking away our video games. Look, Anita, I'm sorry, but we can't actually destroy video games. That doesn't make any sense.
That study has, in fact, already been debunked. As it was, men around college campuses had a target painted on them. Now, I don't know what that actual number is, but it is not 1 out of 4 men. That number is still far too high, but I would rather that colleges operate with factual information when warning students about the dangers of rape. I do like that weird tone you started getting in your voice, however.
Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Does it maybe? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker or other things like that in your comment sections. I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts, and they don't get called out. At least not that I can see. So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you? And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered.
Your question has two parts. The first is about racism and conflating the religion of Islam and the Muslim people. I will admit something to you. After 9/11, I became racial when it comes to Muslims and Arab people in general. It's not something that I generally want to get into, but after that day, I started seeing both Arabs and Muslims in a different light. And there's actually some justification for it, because there are people out there of the Arab race or the Muslim faith who would happily destroy me and you and Western society if they had the opportunity. They have demonstrated this, and to think that it's not true is to hide your face in the sand. I wish that was not the case, and I wait for the day that is the truth, but we are not there yet. As to whether I would break bread with the Muslims, while I have no problems with this, I doubt they would agree. I am a transgendered woman, and in most parts of Muslim culture, I deserve to be thrown off a building for my sins. So perhaps you should ask the Muslims if they could break bread with a trans person.
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general? If so, what? Okay, just step up, just cover your ears for a second and let the smart people talk. If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
Yes, I deny that systemic racism exists in the United States today. This does not mean that individual instances of racism are not out there, and we should work on eliminating those. However, we no longer have institutional, legalized, state-backed forms of racism, like Jim Crow laws, segregation in all of its forms, and of course, slavery. This does not mean, however, that discrimination does not exist, that a person cannot be declined for a job on the basis of race, and no one would ever know. Our society has yet to really fight that, and we have some ways to go. However, the proof that we no longer have systemic racism is that in 2008, we elected our first African American president. As for shutting up and letting the smart people talk, you're doing a terrible job if your goal is to come across as someone who at least listens to the other side of the issue. My question to you would be, exactly how far do you think our society has come since the 1860s? I would love to hear your solutions to problems involving race, and I would hope that they would consist of more than reparations, since no one alive today owned or was alive at the time when people could own slaves.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black-on-black crime, when are you going to do a video about white-on-white crime and what we, as white people, can do to solve the problems in our community?
The problem there is that African Americans comprise a small portion of the overall population, but they commit a percentage of crimes way out of proportion to their population, and thus they are a majority of the convicts that reside in our prison systems. While I have seen videos on the prisons in the United States, I have never done one myself, so your question would not apply to me.
Why is a literal teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, "No! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now! Ah!"
Milo Stewart has removed that video, so any clips I use here would be from response videos. In the video, Milo made a very overgeneralized comment that was basically useless as an argument. I watched Thom Avella's response to the Anti-SJW answers, and he went into detail about this particular issue. I think that if you're going to have a platform on YouTube and you're going to use it to produce videos, you should be prepared for some backlash, no matter how old you are, no matter how naive or fresh-faced you might be. That's YouTube and the internet, wear a helmet. However, I specifically stated in a recent video that I could neither push my viewers to go to a channel or keep them from it, so I admit little to no responsibility in the matter. Personally, I would never post such comments, even to Milo, as he and I have some things in common, and I would be much more interested in dealing with those commonalities.
Wherever did you get the idea that racism was a self-applied identity? And if the only true racists are the racists who self-identify as racists, how can we ever expect to make any social progress to reduce racism? Or did I just answer my own question?
You may have just answered your own question, and if so, congrats on gotchaing yourself.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment, as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
Except for the last few words of your question, you are quite correct. I do not consider discussion of these issues to be racist, but rather discussion of them is quite necessary in order to come up with solutions. So, one proposal would be that we move to crack down on discrimination in hiring practices. In return, we phase out affirmative action, which gives advantages to certain people on the basis of their skin color.
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, you know, if I say, this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty. Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
You are being overly sensitive and butthurt to the point that your logic makes no fucking sense. Black Lives Matter took that name and they've defended it almost like their own turf. You can't say anything that does not affirm that Black Lives Matter, even though the term black is one member of the group included in the term all, as in all lives matter, and this includes blacks. By self-segregating in this way, by saying that Black Lives Matter apparently over and above all others, you are essentially demanding special treatment from the rest of society. Well, sorry sir, you're going to have it out with every other downtrodden group that believes that they are special too.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women, and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts? If that was the case, wouldn't I attempt to get laid from my views instead of not ever trying that?
I don't care why men are involved with feminism so long as they are, and for honest reasons. Women should be able to take care of themselves since they are adults, and this includes whether or not to have sex.
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman. That's rather offensive. What are you doing to stop this kind of behavior in your community?
I'm not doing anything because in reality the majority of the words you mentioned are offensive to you. Again, I don't tell my viewers what they should or should not do. I am not the speech police. If one of them happens to come to you and says something that bothers you, take it up with them directly. Or if it is really serious, complain to YouTube.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument? Deepak Chopra, for example, a man who trots out an endless stream of pseudoscientific quantum woo bollocks, has nearly 3 million followers. So what? Those people follow him because he tells them what they want to hear. Why even mention the number of followers you have? What difference does it make?
Tell me something that I don't know. That's the reason I said many times in my responses that my videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes. The more content I make, the more views I will get. The more entertaining the content is, the more views I will get, and so on. Those metrics have actually very little to do with the woo of the video. It is more a matter of what I tend to find interesting and the information at the time that I am producing the video.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms, and whenever anyone calls you out on your sexist, racist, homophobic, bigoted rhetoric, you become the argument of your own scorn and are hashtag triggered, as they say?
I don't actually hide behind my avatar. His name is Slick, and he is the mascot for this particular brand of YouTube videos that resides on my channel called Politics City. I have another channel called Kalon Primary that specializes in entertainment videos, and it has a different avatar. I have another avatar that I use when talking about transgender issues. I use avatars because of the branding, and also because I am not an attractive person, and I don't pass well as a trans woman. I generally don't sound like one either, but not much can be done about that. It has very little to do with how I feel toward the snowflakes on the left.
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people? And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that you know nobody reads. I mean a public and ongoing anti-bullying stance. Or do you kind of like watching your fans go around harassing people and calling them slurs and telling them to kill themselves? You kind of like it, don't you? I mean, if that's your thing, and I guess that's just what you're into, just makes you a dick.
Problem is, none of my people do that, and again, that is something that if people come to you with, you should either take it up with them or complain to YouTube. As I said, I am not the speech police, nor can I mind read you and determine what you might find offensive. That being said, I have personally taken on the subjects of cyberbullying, child predators, and transgendered issues in recent videos.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
I don't find it hard to believe. Everyone gets hated upon. As I said, it's the internet, wear a helmet. A trans activist recently accused me of harboring internalized transphobia, whatever the fuck that is. I went on my channel and composed a response video, not because I was offended, but because I wanted to point out the hypocrisy of a trans activist using such labels on another member of the trans community.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research? That's simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research. That you have to have a much broader overview, to read the material, to follow the citations through, to look at the broad brush approach to a particular problem. You do realise that you're as much of a social justice warrior as those you critique. It's just that you espouse a different form of social justice, a rather less considerate, rather less forgiving, rather less kind form of social justice.
Short answer, yes, but I don't care. To explain, once again kids, my videos are made for educational and entertainment purposes, and with this in mind, I rarely find that I need to do research down to the level of academic or peer-related journals. I can generally find a well-backed source by doing a quick search.
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
For a long while, I did not remember this one. However, once someone stopped being obstinate with this question and finally answered it, I remembered the premise and I like it. In short, for those who do not know, the concept of the original position is a means of asking about a circumstance without knowing how it will affect you. The most common application of the original position is, if you were designing a world, would you allow slavery not knowing whether you would be a slave? Another example would be that you have multiple children at a birthday party. You ask one child to cut the cake, but you warn the child that they will get the last piece of cake. In both examples, you'd get a very fair outcome. It is an interesting idea, but I am not sure that it has ever been tried on a societal level.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom? If you're not familiar with the concept of academic freedom, it's worth, in the UK at least, looking up the 1988 Education Reform Act and seeing what that says about the rights of academics to put across unpopular opinions.
I don't want to quash academic freedom. If you want to study basket weaving or gender studies and make a complete useless fool out of yourself, go ahead. Add one more useless degree to the waste of leather that clogs the academic world. What I have an honest beef with is when the SJWs come out and use violence, bullying, and mob rule to push an agenda that others might not agree with. And if you don't agree with them and try to speak out about it, they shout you down or get physically violent.
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
I really do need to change my end credits material, don't I? In actuality, Anita was just the really big SJW blowhard that was around back in 2017 when I started making videos for Politics City. She appeared at a panel discussion that was also attended by Sargon of Akkad, and she noticed him in the audience and made a direct reference to him as a garbage human. The story was covered in the first ever video that I ever made. Unfortunately, the video quality shows, however.